Hello friends, welcome back to the Casual Foodist. I'm Brianna, and when it comes to baked goods, scones are one of my favorite things to make. They are buttery and flaky and crumbly in all the best ways. Most of us tend to think of scones as a sweet treat, but today we are making scones with a savory twist. Our scones are going to have salty ham and gooey, melty cheddar cheese, and they are going to be absolutely delicious. Let's get started. Let's dive into our ingredients. So the base of these scones is going to be pretty similar to my apple scones with maple cinnamon glaze. However, we are not going to have any of the sweet spices. We're going to start off with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, as well as 1 tablespoon of baking powder to give our scones some lift. And then here we've got 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, as well as 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder to make these extra savory, and 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika. Next up, we have 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, and we are going to want this as cold as possible. So I would go ahead and pop this in your freezer for about 30 minutes before we make our scones. For our liquid for our scone batter, I've got 1/2 cup of buttermilk. And then we're going to need 2 large eggs. One of these eggs is going to go into our scone batter, and the other egg we are going to use to make an egg wash to brush over the top of the scones at the end to make them nice and golden. And since these are ham and cheese scones, of course we're going to need ham and cheese. And I've got 1 cup of diced ham here, and you can find packages of pre-diced ham in the deli section sometimes. Or you can do what I did. I got a ham steak and diced up the ham myself. And then I've got 1 cup of cheddar cheese, and as always, freshly grated is best, both for meltiness, which is really important, and flavor. Starting with the dry components of our scone dough, we are going to go ahead and add in our all-purpose flour, our 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and make sure you don't use baking soda for this. And then for a little bit of seasoning, I've got 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and then 1/4 teaspoon of smoked paprika. I'm just gonna give this all a big stir. And one of the big reasons we popped our butter in the freezer is we are going to go ahead and grate this. And this is going to ensure we get little flakes and pockets of butter all throughout our dough, and this will help make our scones nice and light and flaky and fluffy. Really all the things we love about scones. And this is a trick I also use when I'm making biscuits or pie dough, or really anything that I want to get that nice fluffy texture with. And with a light hand, we are just going to move that butter into the flour mixture. And then using your hands, you are just going to toss the butter into the flour and make sure every last little shred is coated. And you want your flour mixture to be nice and crumbly. Now on to our wet ingredients. We've got our 1/2 cup of buttermilk, and the acid in the buttermilk is going to react with the baking powder and make our scones nice and fluffy. And then we've got our 1 large egg. We're just going to give this a little whisk to break that egg up. And then to our wet mixture, I'm going to go ahead and add in our ham. Oh, a few fingers on there. As well as our shredded cheese. I'm just going to give this a nice little stir. And now we're going to bring everyone to the party. So we are just going to add in our buttermilk and ham and egg and cheese mixture right into that flour and butter mixture. And then we're just going to give this a good stir. And you want to take care not to overwork the dough. So we are just going to stir this until everything is moistened and nice and coated. And you want to take care not to overwork the dough. So we are just going to stir this until it just starts forming a dough and coming together. We're just going to turn our dough out onto our parchment paper. And I've got this over a baking mat with measurements since I am horrible at measuring by sight. And while it looks like a crumbly mess now, we are just going to form this into an 8-inch circle. And this is going to start coming together really quick. It does not take much. And again, to keep our scones light and fluffy, we do not want to overwork this at all. And then I'm just going to slide my parchment paper onto my baking sheet. Voila! To cut our scone dough, I am using a bench scraper. You can also use a knife, but to keep it from sticking, I would spray it with some cooking spray first. And I am just going to cut this into 8 equal pieces. I've gone ahead and whisked together 1 large egg and 1 tablespoon of water to create an egg wash. And we are just going to brush this egg wash over our scones, and this will give them a nice golden brown exterior. Our scones are ready for the oven. I've got my oven preheated to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, and we are going to bake our scones for 22 to 25 minutes. And you want to keep an eye on the last few minutes to make sure that they get golden but don't burn. All right, we'll see you on the other side. Guys, our scones are all done. Let's take a look at these guys. They baked up nice and light and fluffy, and look at all of that crispy ham and melted cheese in there. Of course, we've got to give this a taste. Those buttery, cheesy, flaky layers are absolutely divine, and the ham brings so much flavor. I think these scones would earn me a handshake from Paul Hollywood. These scones would be perfect for breakfast, brunch, as a side for a light lunch, or really just anytime you want a great snack. You guys are going to love these. You can find a link to the full recipe below or at casualfoodist.com. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Casual Foodist for more recipes like this.